Let's talk about Jedward. Identical twins, John and Edward Grimes. They stormed into the X Factor in 2009 and instantly divided the nation. Some called them a joke act, some called them genius. Either way, they became pop cultural icons. I think the majority of us, though, can all agree that they were a joke act. Now, for anyone who's never heard of Jedward, the one way I would describe them best is like Ireland's answer to the Cheeky Girls. And if you've never heard of the Cheeky Girls, then you're a lost cause. You know, this video, you're too young to be watching this video. Get out of here, you little rapscallion, and get back to your dual lipper concert or whatnot. Anyway, Jedward. What really happened to Jedward? First, a little recap just so you can fully immerse yourself in the story here. John and Edward were Irish twins who auditioned for the X Factor way back in 2009, which was the heyday of the X Factor. With their spiky hair and boundless energy and questionable vocals, they were unlike anything the show has ever seen. They were extremely memorable. Simon Cowell famously hated them, but Louis Walsh, he saw potential. Not as singers, but as entertainers, and that's exactly what they became. And the more we learn about X Factor, as this is probably the 5th video that we've done on the X Factor, the more I learn that X Factor was not the problem, Simon Cowell was. And Simon Cowell's record label was the real evil in British entertainment history. So the fact that it was Louis Walsh, even though a lot of people dislike Louis Walsh, it was great for Jedward to be on side Louis rather than side Simon. Also, there's one thing we're yet to do, which is a solo video on Louis Walsh, the history, the recap, and where is he now. If you would like to see that one, let me know in the comments. Back to Jedward. So we're in 2009, the X Factor. Week after week, Jedward delivered chaotic, over-the-top performances. They couldn't really sing, but they could perform well. That made them unforgettable. They finished in 6th place on the X Factor, but in reality, they were one of the season's biggest stars. By 2010, they had a record deal, hit singles, a children's TV show, and even represented Ireland in Eurovision twice. Not just once, twice they represented Ireland. I think children's TV was definitely the way they should have went, because they were very bouncy and gave off this like children's entertainment vibe. They were like the kind of act you would find at like a haven campsite, right? But with fame came backlash, and these two were very familiar with backlash. Critics dismissed them as talentless, tabloids mocked their every move, and music purists hated these bubblegum pop covers that they would do of songs. They were also heavily managed, often accused of being a manufactured novelty act, basically the early days of industry plant. Some even speculated that they would vanish as soon as the X Factor had died down. But Jedward had something no one expected: staying power. Through sheer force of personality, they kept themselves in the spotlight long after everyone else from that series of the X Factor was forgotten about. Jedward was still being spoke about, they were still being remembered. Might not have been great what people were saying about them, but they were still saying stuff about them. They were still saying stuff about them. They were still in the spotlight. So where are they now? In recent years, Jedward has transformed their image. They became outspoken on social media, using Twitter to comment on things like politics and social issues and the entertainment industry itself, something that we never thought Jedward would be known for, speaking up. They've continued to release music independently, they've built a loyal cult fan base, and they've leaned into their identity as pop culture outsiders. Today, Jedward are less about chasing charts and more about just being themselves, chaotic, unapologetic, and surprisingly actually quite political and clever, really. This is what they look like now, or at least in recent times. They do a lot of social media stuff, and you know, they're making a life for themselves. They're not There's a lot of these acts that were like huge on X Factor and talent shows and just in the UK press way back in like 2009, 2010, who went on to be forgotten about and then went on to work regular jobs again. Jedward, even though they're not like on the newspapers every day and they're not by no means huge, are still making a living from entertaining. They just took on social media basically. They're just doing the social media thing like everyone's doing, like I'm doing, but they do it way better than me, or way more successful than me, should I say. So what's next for Jedward? They've hinted at documentaries, which I think would be very interesting, both a documentary about Jedward or just them taking on the role as like a Louis Theroux and doing their own documentaries. I actually think would be really interesting. I would watch that. They've also hinted at independent music, but personally I think maybe drop the music thing. I think they make more money and they do better as entertainers as just commenting and commentary and speaking and hosting like the documentary thing, as opposed to the music career. I don't think is the path they should be going around. Yes, they became famous for music, but let's face it, they was never the most musical talented. So they've also hinted at returning to Eurovision. Some fans believe they could transition into full-time activism, given how vocal that they became online. But wherever happens, one thing is clear: Jedward will never be forgotten, nor will they ever be boring. Were Jedward pop culture geniuses all along? Was this the plan from day one, to come off as a little bit silly, to come off as a novelty act, but secretly actually control their own fate all along the way? Or was they just the UK's most entertaining train wreck that got a little bit lucky? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, even though it doesn't change anything if I say it or not, hit the subscribe button, I guess. Thank you.